Hi, it's Ashwin here. Today on Help Me I'm a Comedian, we'll get into some pretty heavy topics, including a story about a method of suicide. If you don't think you're up to listening, please don't put yourself through it. And if you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek help. You can call Lifeline anytime on 13 11 14. How important are your hands to your livelihood? For my guest today, they are vital, or at least that's what he thought for a very long time. Al Gibson was a gigging musician. He played the guitar when he lost his left ring finger in a cable skiing accident, a devastating outcome for a right-handed guitar player. This is Help Me I'm a Comedian. I'm Ashwin Segkar, and with me as always to unpack the mind of a comedian is psychologist Dr. Rachel Hannam. Al, the fact that you lost your left ring finger, the finger traditionally used for a wedding ring, it kind of foreshadowed what happened next. What happened?
Yeah, I guess leading up to that, so many things are happening with my family. My youngest daughter, long story short, she was self-harming. So, as a parent, where your job to protect your children at all costs, and you can't protect them from themselves, is a very significant thing to do.
It's extremely stressful.
Incredibly, yeah. It was quite the drain on my ex-wife and myself as well. But, I have to make the distinction that in no way, shape or form is my daughter responsible for our split. Things weren't rosy, and I had anxiety issues, and so, everything was just a cocktail of disaster, basically, just waiting to explode. And it did one day when my daughter and I had a clash, and there's no nice way to say it, but it was a violent interaction, and my daughter would not talk to me for probably about 3 months to come. So I was living in my car for a couple of days and decided that I was going to go cable skiing. And I still had my wedding ring on. And the second time I got up onto a wakeboard, fell over, and the handle got caught under my ring and just completely ripped my finger off. Well, it degloved it, basically. So I knew it had happened. I'm trying to make sense of it in my brain. And I then got up above the water, pulled my hand out of the water and looked at it and just screamed. Everything at that moment felt like my life was over. Professionally, I just didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I know I was in shock, but I also knew the consequences of what just happened. I was in hospital for 2 days before they told me that they had to come and amputate my finger. Up till then, I sort of had the hope that, maybe they'll put skin on it from here and there, and because there was still 2/3 of it left. But when they told me that they had to amputate their finger, I was completely broken. Yeah. But while I was still in hospital, my wife had come to see me, and my daughter was there as well, but she would not come in to talk to me. So that was how angry and how upset she was at me. And I don't blame her. I turned around to my wife and said, I just hate my life. And she went away and come back half an hour later, and she goes, when you say you hate your life, that really hurts my feelings. And I just said, I don't know where my life is going right now, and you're telling me that your feelings are hurt?
I do often say to my clients, though, you can't give empathy from hell.
No.
So if you're in hell and the other person's in hell, it's very unlikely that either of you are going to be able to have empathy.
I actually completely understand that, yes.
Yeah.
How did these feelings evolve after 2 months, 3 months? It didn't get better, did it? Did it get worse in it? And in what way?
Okay. Well, even in the next week, we were supposed to go to a counselling session that was to help my wife and I interact and I can talk to our daughter. And had the previous events not happened, it was a great idea. But, here's the timeline. Finger got ripped off on Tuesday, had surgery on Friday.
Terrible timing.
And I was kind of dragged there. I felt I was anyway. And
still in immense shock and grief about your finger.
I was in a haze.
Of course.
I was really in a haze.
How else could you be?
And of course, my wife had told the psychologist that I didn't want to be there. And she said, your wife tells me you didn't want to be here today. I said, well, no. I mean, yeah, exactly. I held up my hand and said, no, not really. And also, too, you know, like, bear in mind, we've been to 2 psychiatrists and 2 psychologists about our daughter, and I'd said to her, and this was kind of disrespectful, I do kind of regret it, but saying, I doubt you have anything fresh and new to add to the conversation. And so, barring my injury, I think I insulted everyone in the room, and so I put everyone offside, and I think, you know, in that session, you know, like, she'd asked my ex-wife all the good qualities she thought that I had, and she just rattled them straight off. And then they looked at me, and I was like a deer in the headlights, and I just couldn't think of a thing. It's not that I couldn't think of anything.
You just couldn't think?
I just couldn't think,
Of course not.
I was in just such a panic state at that
Yes.
moment. And so she said, so where were you now? Where are you now in your head? And I said, well, I was ready to move out. But, of course, what I think my ex-wife heard was, I'm moving out. and it was later on that night that she kicked me out of the bedroom, and then I ended up staying in the spare room for the next 8 months while everything decayed, and while we were trying to work out, you know, who gets the kids, who gets the house, who's going to pay off the credit card, who does all this sort of stuff for the next 8 months. It was just hell.
That would have been hell.
It was hell. And
Chronically stressful.
Yes, it was. It was, and again, like at the time, my wife was. She said, "I kicked you out of the room, and you made a nest in there." What she didn't understand was there was not a safe place in the world for me, and that was the only place that I could be.
Your only refuge.
Yeah, yeah. It was. Yeah, I guess it was a nest in a way, because I wouldn't come out of the room. I hardly interacted with my own kids in that time. We had a lot of fights in front of the kids, and you know, like, I have to claim responsibility for that, because I got angry every time. I just fell for it every time. And then
You have to claim responsibility, but you also have to forgive yourself.
True. I find that very difficult.
Yeah.
So I think it was maybe 4 months before I even contemplated grieving of what was happening. All I knew is I had to get on with it.
Survival mode.
Survival mode, that's right. And get back to playing guitar, and get back to singing and working, and comedy as well. I think within 2 months of it happening, I'm doing 5 minutes on it, or 10 minutes on stage about my finger being missing, you know. So
Yeah, and we'll come back to the comedy a little bit later, because you've talked about a couple of things so far. Before we move on, you just mentioned that you have trouble forgiving yourself, which might be an ongoing issue. Can you tell us more about that?
I regret getting angry, because I think that has, in my mind, it's always feels like I've done irreparable damage with the relationship with my kids, particularly my youngest daughter. To give an example, like 2 Christmases ago, I was so stressed about seeing, in particular, my youngest daughter, and please, she's not a demon. She's wonderful. She's a very caring person. It's just, again, it's my perception of how things are, and I was so anxious to see her, like anxious as in how it was going to pan out, because we were having words in the argument, because I'd blocked her mother on Facebook and text messages and everything, because it stresses me out to the point where I feel suicidal every time I had an interaction with her. And I tried to have that conversation with her, but, you know, in the back of your brain, you're saying, well, you know, like, every time I talk to your mum, I want to kill myself. That's what it sounds like. It's, you know.
Yeah, you've got to be careful with those kind of things. Yeah,
exactly. And it just sounds flippant, but it is a very profound thing for me.
It triggered intense distress for you.
Absolutely.
That would be one way of saying it.
And and because I was so distressed or anxious about how it was going to go, I did the most ridiculous. I got so drunk at my mum and dad's, and while they were there, and so in trying to get courage and calm myself down, I just got hammered and made an idiot of myself. I nearly had a fight with my dad. Like, we haven't been like that since I was 18.
Alcohol's good for that.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So I worry far too much about it. But again, I kind of put myself into those situations. And when I was with, just after everyone had moved out, there was a lot of back and forth text messages between their mother and I. And again, I claim responsibility for this as well, because I took the bait and I got angry and I made angry texts back. And she was showing them to my daughter. And so she said, look, see what your dad's doing. And I don't know why she did that. We kind of agreed that we wouldn't play those sort of games. And again, these are just my perceptions of what was happening, because I don't know what's happening on the other side. But I do know that my daughter would repeat back word for word things that I'd said. And when we're all together, it doesn't seem the case at all. In fact, on the surface, and even my girlfriend would go, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you guys you get on so well. But as soon as they're gone, it's like they hate me.
That's what your mind tells you.
Yes, that's what exactly.
Have you ever told them this?
No. It's not a conversation that we've been able to have, I think.
Because it shows how much you love them, to me. The fact that you're so worried about them hating you and that makes you so anxious is a sign of how much you love them.
It kills me inside. It
kills you inside because you love them so deeply. That's why I suggest considering taking them backstage and letting them know what goes on behind the scenes for you. Just a little bit, not to burden them, but to let them know that you're human.
What scares me about that, though, is, are they going to think I'm doing it for attention, or, is this just
clarify
some sort of
your
game?
intention.
Yeah.
Say, I'm letting you know this because it keeps coming up for me.
Yeah.
And because I love you so much, it's not to make a burden for you. I just need to let you know that I have these thoughts after we say goodbye, and I think it's because I still feel really bad about interactions we've had in the past, and I want to say sorry again. Something
actually, thank you. Yeah, that's really good advice.
I've heard lots of stories about messy breakups. Once you've been together a long time and there's kids involved, there's a lot of pain on both sides, much heartache, and you're both in hell and unable to give empathy. But we want to get to the point where we feel a kind of, a detached indifference that comes with a certain amount of civility or respect. How have you come some distance with that? Have you got a little bit of that yet?
Not as much as I should. I try. One thing I never do is I never talk badly of their mother, ever, in front of them, ever. I don't say a bad thing about them.
Yeah,
because
that's important.
It is important. I think it's extremely important. Because
then the child feels like they have to take sides and they don't want to feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, that kind of happened with mediation. So we went through mediation when we were splitting up to see, who was going to have the kids, and threw that open to the kids, and of course they chose to go with their mum, and of course that is a stab in the heart. And I don't blame them. My son actually, I think he was 16 at the time, he said, look, it just makes sense to go with mum.
You don't have to blame them to feel deep hurt.
Oh no, I didn't.
Just hurts.
It really did hurt. And particularly when we told them that we were going to split up, and we sat down and she goes, your dad has something to say. And I took the bait and I told them everything, and it was like, and you could just see their horror and shock, and why is Dad telling us that Mum and Dad are splitting up? And
so you got made bad cop in that situation?
Yeah, that's how I felt. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it might not have been the case, but again, it's I'm not in a good place.
No.
Yeah.
Ashwin Segkar and Rachel Hannam with you on ABC Radio, and our guest today on Help Me I'm a Comedian is Al Gibson. Every time I see you at gigs, you are such a joy to be around. You're joking and you're smiling. You actually lift the mood. You do lift the mood of people. I mean that sincerely.
Thanks, man.
And when you are talking about these darker places that you've been to over the last few years, I didn't know about it. I'm sure other people will be in a similar situation where they might have someone close to them who doesn't know the suffering that their friend is going through. You told Kim, our producer, that last November that you made a plan to take your own life. Unfortunately, you called Lifeline and didn't do it. Can you tell us more about what happened that day and what you were going through?
Yeah. Again, it was sort of coming up to Christmas, and always around Christmas time is when I have these things in my head that I'm convinced that my kids don't want to talk to me. Again, it's probably not the case, but it's just over and over in my head. So I was at a gig, I was at a music gig, and I was playing, people were dancing, people were having a really good time, and I just looked around, and I just said, I'm going to go and kill myself. I just, at that particular moment, I didn't feel any joy in seeing anyone having fun.
So there was a contrast between everyone else feeling joy and you felt nothing.
And I just looked at them, and I turned my phone off, and then went home, and I tied a noose and hung it up in the shed, and then I went inside and had about maybe 4 or 5 shots of vodka to try and get some courage up, and I don't know why, but I decided to ring Lifeline instead. Now, talking to Kim, your producer, at the time, I said I chickened out, and she said, you know, some would look at it as coming to your senses rather than chickening out, and now I prefer to think of it that way. I think that was such a simple way to clarify it, that it's actually like quite uplifting.
Yes.
You know. And so, I called Lifeline, and the police were there in a shot. And just as they turned up, my girlfriend. And now I should also it would be really remiss of me if I don't mention my beautiful girlfriend, who has been so patient with me. And she had to, 3 months into a relationship, she stumbled into this mess, and she stuck with me and loves me and is so patient. And, she came just as the police were there, and they drove me to the hospital. And
how were the police with you?
They were really good.
Really good.
They're extremely
Everybody
good.
I've talked to in this situation says the police handle it really well.
Yeah, I couldn't fault it. And because my girlfriend had turned up, Sarah had turned up, I said, can you just go into the shed, please, and take the rope down? So, and they said, oh, okay. And they went out, and they came and they took it with them and destroyed it. So thank God, because imagine walking in on that. I mean, for a start, I think that's probably why I stopped and thought about what I was doing too, is because who would find me? Whoever found me would be deeply traumatized, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yes. And all your pain would be transferred over to other people.
Yeah, exactly. Because I used to think, this is the weird thing about depression and suicide, is you go, you know what, I'm never going to do that. I'll never kill myself. I just can't see it, that being the final solution.
But it's like solution. You're in a dark box and there's not a pinhole of light coming through.
Yeah, it is so powerful.
Yes.
And
all-consuming.
Very consuming. And then, you know how everyone says, hey, talk to me, you can talk to me.
You don't feel like that.
No, you don't. You do not want to talk to anybody. And that's why it's, the Are You OK movement or campaign. I find a lot of my Facebook friends put shit on it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think that there is a critique that you can make of it.
Yeah. Say whatever you like.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I see people that put shit on the Are You OK movement or that day or whatever. But the thing is, it is probably one of the most important questions you can ask someone who is in that position, because, again, they're not going to offer you any information.
But if someone had come up to you at the end of that night and said, hey, Al, are you okay? What would
I would have crumbled.
Oh, you would have crumbled?
Yeah.
Good.
Because I was not okay.
And you recognised that?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're not normal thoughts.
No.
If you normalise killing yourself, then, you're in a really bad place.
I agree. But you were in a very abnormal and difficult situation. So, it's abnormal in a way. Definitely it's abnormal. But you're not the first person who's been through this.
Oh, no.
I mean,
no. And see, that's another thing too, is that you feel like you're a bit of an imposter because some people have got it worse than you. And you go, what are you complaining about? Yeah, I even did it with my finger. When I went to a trauma clinic, I'm looking at people missing hands. I go, oh, you only missed a finger, dude. Like, just grow up.
We shouldn't compare our suffering to other people's suffering.
No. What I've learned is that whatever you're going through is very real to you.
Yeah.
And nobody can compare or measure, your suffering to anything else. You just can't. And, like, in that time period where we're all still living under the same roof, I think about maybe 4 months into it, I just went through a stage where I couldn't stop crying. I think this is when the PTSD started really kicking in. And, 2 minutes before I'd be on stage, I'd cry my eyes out and then put on the big smile when you get out on stage.
Mm. It's amazing how your physiology can shift so fast.
Yes, yeah. But my daughter caught me crying one day and she said, "Are you okay?"
Right.
And at that moment, I realised that nobody had asked me that question. And so, that was really confronting for me.
It brings up all the grief and the recognition of the loneliness that you'd been living with for so long.
Yeah, everything that I was holding in,
Yeah.
the cracks were beginning to form and I just wasn't containing it anymore. And, it was coming out in some bizarre ways, like, road rage and anger.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Just really crazy stuff like...
That's what happens.
Yeah,
Really.
it was nuts.
Yeah. This is why I'm a big fan of having mini breakdowns several times a year so that it doesn't build up to a point.
What's involved in a mini breakdown?
I can only speak for myself. But, it'll be... start with a recognition of there's some accumulation of stress. There's some accumulation of some kind of difficult emotion that I've been ignoring or pushing down. And then for me, I go and watch Lion or some other movie that's going to make me cry and then I can just, cocoon under the doona and get it out. We've evolved to cry like we've evolved to laugh. Both of them are a release of tension.
Well, I said to a friend about emotional roller coasters rarely derail and kill everyone. So
Yes.
That's true.
I like that concept. And I think some people have trouble crying. I have trouble crying at major events.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just a really beautiful Facebook video or something like you just got to find your mini breakdown trigger and it can be different for anyone.
Oh, I have
Ashwin.
many triggers.
You have many triggers.
Yeah.
Me too.
I'm good. I'm glad you talked about how you came out of that dark day. Just wanted, before we move on,
Yes.
It sounded like you said you were concerned about who would find you that day and the impact you would have on other people. Because some people might be thinking they're doing others a favour by ending their own life. That's part of the motivation for them. And you realise that moment you are not doing anyone a favour.
No.
And even though you didn't necessarily discover hope, you at least thought about other people, and that was the first step for you. Can you just explain the shift in mindset that stopped you from taking your own life that day?
Okay, well, one thing I always thought about suicide is that I thought it was, and this is just my take on it, that it was a selfish thing. Like you said, your pain actually becomes someone else's pain, and I've always maintained that. I think that sort of came back to me at the right moment, fortunately, because it would have been my girlfriend that found me, and
your children wouldn't have gotten over it either. I've worked with the bereaved from suicide. It's really hard.
Yeah.
For those left behind.
And also, too, I don't blame my kids for anything. I love them so much. I'm so proud of all of them. I would hate for them to think that they triggered me into it's not that. It's my own.
You thought you were a burden,
sense of worth,
as Ashwin said. And a lot of people in that suicidal state will say that. I feel like everyone will be better off without me.
Yeah, pretty much. And then also the pain ends as well.
But the thing is to know, if anyone's listening who's been there, you might agree, you are about to make the biggest decision of your life in the most impaired state that you've ever been in. Do you know, when you think about it like that? In fact, I've had clients who've told me they haven't killed themselves because they remember me saying that to them. Oh, I'm impaired. I'm not in a good mental state to be making any decision right now, let alone one like this.
Yeah. Well, I didn't change my will or anything, so...
Okay. If that story of Al's has brought up any issues with you and you need to talk to someone, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14. Al, I want to talk to you about losing your finger and you realising, before most people, you were talking about having to change your career at that moment, which is, as Rachel said, is such an immediate thought to think about when you lose your finger. Had you thought about an alternative career, and what did you end up doing to save your career?
Okay, at that moment I thought Well, like I said, I thought it was all over. So it was really bizarre. I'm going through crisis mode going, okay, well, I can still write. I can write music. I can write jokes. I can write scripts. I can still sing. If I can't play, I can probably sing. I can do this. So
you went into problem-solving mode straight away.
Straight up, yeah.
Which is an evolutionary mechanism, right?
Yeah.
What can I do?
It was really odd.
Yeah.
And I thought about it later on. I think, well, who does that?
Everybody, because we're evolved to go into problem-solving mode, survival mode, fix-it mode.
I guess this sort of come down to the not grieving. I had to shut all that out so that I could keep going. And so what I did was I picked up a guitar and I made a few chords and then I just put it away because I'll wait until I do an actual gig. I made this little deal with myself that if I get through a gig, then we'll see, And so picked up the guitar, played a couple of chords, found out I could do this, and then I just put it away because I didn't want to know what I couldn't do, if that makes sense.
What did you find out?
There's like some 4-fingered jazz chords that you really need that finger for.
So a lot of Hendrix.
Yeah, so just a lot of power chords, but I can form normal bar chords now. I just play them differently, or I'll mute some strings that basically I should have been playing and just play the dominant notes of a chord, which work quite well. And, of course, lead playing, just playing solos and stuff like that. So in some ways I'm actually a better player now than I was back then because I took it a lot more seriously. It's like I had something to prove to myself that I really, really needed to get done. And the first gig that I actually did do was mentally and physically exhausting because I had to rethink everything as I was doing it. So, I mean, if I don't even know what would be a good example, but for me, like, there's a lot of muscle memory with guitar. I don't know whether you've ever played guitar or an instrument, but there's a memory of particular chords, and I had to rethink it without that finger and just transpose, I guess, a chord physically with using my little finger or flattening over 2 strings or whatever, and then and at the end of it, I go, okay, I think I can do this.
Wow, what an adaptation.
And that gave me the strength to do it, so, yeah.
Strength. Can I ask you, Al, there's a phrase in psychology called post-traumatic growth, which is and actually it's not a theory, there's a finding that 70% of people who've been through a trauma at some point in the years following actually report being a better person for it in certain ways.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of any of your post-traumatic growth?
In some ways. I think, a good example would be my girlfriend's kids. I'm a lot more patient with them and realise that, some things are... it's probably more important to just do them rather than to do them well. And I guess, too, from past relationships and... I think now I know what triggers me into anger or anxiety, and I can see where they're coming, and so and now we it just helps where I know I'm getting annoyed, and so I can just sort of tone it back a bit.
Rachel, coping with PTSD, when those emotions well up, can it help to see yourself as separate from the emotion, like be the witness of the emotions? Is that something people in the midst of a PTSD attack can use to calm down?
Yeah, the observer self, that witness part of our, that can see I am not this overwhelm, I'm not this sadness. It is in me, but I am the one who's experiencing it, who's witnessing it. I think that's much harder when it's completely overwhelming you, right? But it's definitely a practice that we can develop, that we can notice it, feel it, observe it, and let it move through us and out of us without it hijacking us.
Al Gibson and Rachel Hannam, thank you both for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashwin.
You are listening to ABC Radio. This was Help Me, I'm a Comedian. If the conversation today has made you want to talk to someone, Lifeline provides 24-hour crisis counselling. Their number is 13 11 14, or you can find other resources at beyondblue.org.au. Alternatively, you can speak to your GP now and arrange Medicare-supported sessions with a psychologist. You can find this and all of our other interviews on the ABC Radio website, abc.net.au/radio/programs/editor's choice. I'm Ashwin Segkar. See you next week.